licenses, permits, and interest income and other. And that's a drop of about $3.3 million in each year. That is largely due to changes in business license expectations.
Right.
And then there's a reduction in emergency services E911 reimbursements.
What up, everybody? Sorry to be running late today. I had to try to get my head around the budget, and I'm still a bit confused. You know what I mean? I'm still watching it. I am just an average person that likes cannabis. And as a Black woman, I've got to be concerned about equity within the industry. So what do you get? Lots of research. What up, Joe? What, the former bud tender? How you doing this morning? Thought we could get into a decent conversation today on the current equity efforts. And pardon me while I try to get my screen right. Because it's approximately 100 cumulative difference between. Okay. All right, let's just get to the notes. Hi, everybody. There's no music today, just because today is a little bit serious, but I am always going to be rolling up a joint because after I get on here, I need to decompress. You feel me? And so rolling up some Peach Rangs, okay, by FDG. It smells great, tastes great. And let me just make sure my mic is up, because what I realized was the last stream, y'all couldn't hear me on YouTube. So we live on Instagram, we live on YouTube. Let's kind of get into the conversation. Where I left off at talking about equity last time was that the state had moved to pass some current guidelines, some rules, and we have until the 14th for public comment, and they have until the 28th of September, 14th of September, 28th of September, of course, to get back to us and finalize those rules for issuing and for equity legislation, basically, here in the state of Washington. That's what the Liquor and Cannabis Board said. And we had a meeting to talk about proposed ordinances on the city of Seattle-wide level. Since then, there has been 2 more meetings to bring up these ordinances. So August 11th and August 17th. And that's kind of where I had left off in my research of figuring out what the hell is going on in equity. And I don't know how Fox News got a hold of it, talking about they want $1 million, like with these just eye-catching headlines. And once again, Washington cannabis industry is thrust into the limelight of trying to figure out our equity. Meanwhile, the people on the ground actually selling weed was like, what's happening? So that's why I exist, why I'm here, because I like to represent the people. I am the people. I have to sell this weed. And I, as a Black person living in the state of Washington, I would like to see some reparations made to the community out here. I'm not from Washington, but I want to see some reparations made to the community that was locked out of this industry in its inception, correct? So at the 8/11 meeting, what happened there is that they reviewed the ordinances, setting it up for a later debate, which was held on the 8/17 amendment and voting. And we learned a few things, right? Because the most contested ordinance was the first one. And I say contested as in like, it wasn't even the ordinance itself. It was definitely an amendment to the ordinance proposed by the chair, Teresa Mosqueda, right? And it was, and I say contested mainly because of how people responded to the wording, right? Yeah, let's get some equity up in here for real. So how the wording, such as, and the suggested organization around it. So basically they said, we want to meet what the state is doing. We want this conversation, these ordinances we're passing are preemptively getting us ready to be on par with what the state is doing legislatively, right? So we're trying to get ready for our 2023 year, what we're going to be discussing. Let's have some actual guidelines presented. So you get ordinances 120, 120, 391, 120, 392, 120, 393. Those are the three ordinances that they were talking about in this meeting. And the first one is just establishing the social equity program. The other two are backing it either with like financial changes and it's slipping my mind at this moment in time, but like basic minor changes that they would have to make to support a social equity legislation. And we learned that it was the mayor's office that requested a cannabis needs assessment, right? Because there was some confusion, like why are we amending the first ordinance to include a cannabis needs assessment if like we did the racial equity toolkit and we already evaluated what as an industry we need. And I am getting up and walking away from this live just because way too much is happening outside my place. Here we go. So and that was brought up by Chairperson Nielsen. And I think that was a great question. Like, if we already have a racial equity toolkit that has all of these suggestions from all the stakeholders in the industry, and we, as a state, has a whole social equity board, and we're just trying to meet their guidelines, like, why do we need another assessment on the city level to figure out how to help the cannabis industry? And it was because the mayor's office needs to figure out what scope of training that we would provide to these social equity license holders going forward, and the cost of that training, like what this program is going to cost the city. That's what they need to know, and they're not getting the answers quick enough from their research. So they thought, let's just add it in to this ordinance and make it a little bit easier to get the information, which is where that $250,000 sum came from. I still don't know where the $1 million for social equity conversation. I watched the videos. They weren't really talking about money out on the 8/11 live stream. And so Fox, do better. If somebody else out there knows where they got that million from, hit me. All right. So this needs assessment in theory would cost the city $250,000 to get feedback on what training workers in the industry would benefit from, right? That's what we learned, and and who pushed that into the legislation. And then we learned that there are 39 unused licenses available for the state, 2 for sure within the city of Seattle, 8 potential. So questions that everyone wants to know, because like we're always talking as if there's going to be a ton of social equity out there, but the number of licenses are limited. It's fixed, right? So who's going to get them and why? Who knows? Now we move on to 817. And I say who knows? Well, that's why I say who knows because the draft rules are not finalized. They voted on them at the statewide, but they haven't they talked about them, they proposed them, but the voting they have until the 28th, which I said before. Focus. So 817 rolls around, they have this special meeting, and when I tell you this meeting got spicy, I think there is some tensions amongst individuals on the city council. You can watch it, you can see where they're coming from, and more so amongst the individual stakeholders that are looking at social equity in Washington. And so what I see is like there are kind of maybe 3 factions. There's the Black community and representatives of that voice. There is the cannabis owners, right? Or former industry owners. And then there's the individuals that represent the laborers, aka the union, right? And the 2 first stakeholders acknowledge in their public comments that they're concerned that the final stakeholder has too much weight, too much power, especially in the amendment proposed by Chairwoman Mosqueda, saying that we need a nonprofit organization that has experience in retail training, that and the statement in itself said such as We Train. And We Train is an organization that is associated with UFCW 3000, the union that is helping unionize pot shops in the city as is. So you can see where the business owners within the industry would be a little ruffled, but why the Black community is ruffled, I'm intrigued. And what I found out as a result of watching these meetings is that not only are they ruffled, but they have voted to move against any proposed legislation by the union multiple times at this point, right? Now, all good and well. The chair folks start debating these ordinances, and all three pass. The first one with the amendment proposed by Chair Mosqueda, which is it has to be a nonprofit organization. The second one is passed with amendments. The third one straight up. And I think in terms of equity, it's a win, right? Like we actually get some conversation on the citywide level about equity going forward in 2023, which it only makes sense. One, Seattle being like one of the largest wealth holders in the state and pushing legislation commonly that the state tends to fall in line on. So if they have a very solid set of legislation set up, we could see even better situation or standards for equity at the statewide level overall, right? So cool. What I still don't see is where the city is going to get the funding for this cannabis needs assessment, because again, it's $250,000. And what I saw was a budget discussion that doesn't look that great, right? Folks didn't stay around for that conversation. I feel like the cannabis ordinances was like voted on, ding, 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 and folks chucks the deuce. But the rest of that live stream, which the recordings are available, and I will drop a link in the bio, so valuable because there is a gentleman who tried to slug his way talking about the potential budget forecast and as a result of a potential recession, which we all know it's a fucking recession, and the pessimistic forecast for the city, like he is setting it up so that like there are some places that in my understanding we're in the red, and that's why I was late, because I heard negative 290 million, but that can't be right. So I'm trying to rewatch the video to figure out exactly where they're predicting the city of Seattle budget goes in 2023. Because if the city is at a deficit, which if the city is at a deficit, how are we going to fund a social equity grant? How are we going to fund these sort of situations? More importantly, it brought up a few questions as a person who is connected to many individuals in the industry and an industry worker myself. So on our story, we posted a couple of questions, which was, do you think cannabis can be cannabis training or cannabis retail training can be compared to that of other retail industries? And we got a 47% no. 27% said yes, and 27% said it needed a longer response. And I said, okay, well, like as someone who works in the industry and knows currently our sales are down, right? So like bud is not recession proof. If our sales are down and maybe returning to the like pre-pandemic normals, we still have greater issues based on legislation facing our industry. Do you think adding more retail license would solve some of those current industry issues? Would we balance out our sales? Would the the price fluctuation amongst different municipalities change? Would we get some leveling out of this industry? 60% of you guys said no, okay? It wouldn't. And I'm not an individual that just takes like yes, no answers. So we slid into the DMs of the individuals that voted. And may I tell you, they were brokers, they were dispensary owners, they were potential individuals that are interested in the cannabis industry that gave feedback, bud tenders. I mean, these are the entrepreneurs, people that are actively working in cannabis, because unfortunately, our legislators, in my meetings with them, do not know enough about the actual functioning of our current cannabis industry. Yes, they got feedback from stakeholders who were former or formerly in the industry. That what up, Omar? Formerly in the industry or what have you, but these individuals themselves, they have a lot going on and a lot more going on than to pay attention directly to the current climate of cannabis. And as such, as a person that does pay attention to the current climate, I want to know, like, are we going to get more retail licenses? Is that going to fix the bottleneck that we have with the fact that there are over 1,000 producer processors, maybe under 300 or 300 or so retailers, and that there's price wars as a result of that? Like, do you think getting more retailers is going to fix that problem? All right. So the feedback we got when we asked them to elaborate on their answers, the no was straightforward. They need to cut down on the amount of processors and allow small tier to sell their stuff directly to the public or a farmer market sale, style sale. And I've heard that concept multiple times, that the small tier farms should be able to sell directly to consumers, and or like the craft retailer concept, maybe even demolishing what our current medical industry is holding on to, incorporating all of those funds and allowing home grow, right? Like, but those were the solutions offered to fix what we're seeing play out on the market. And then those are people that, again, work directly in the industry. Like when I asked them, the majority of the individuals who voted no are currently active in our industry. So then the individuals that said yes, cannabis should be treated like retail. Yes, yes, more retail license will solve the problem. Their thought process was like, in a department store, you have to train workers to have a great customer service, to learn to be knowledgeable of the product in the store, and help them choose what they need. So cannabis retail training, you're giving workers the same type of training that will be beneficial to the consumer and helping them gain the best knowledge of the product of what they're purchasing. And with merchandising, in the sense of how you display product to catch the attention of your consumers, it's very much like the retail store. And a lot in the aspect also of location of your store, there being some elitism tied to the customer service that you provide, and how the owners themselves expect you to treat those shopping. And that is something we have to attest to. Each municipality, each shop, depending on its location, has its own vibe at this moment in time. There were no basic industry standards set, in my opinion, for how the business owner, once they get their license, then cultivates the culture of their business, right? Like the small business owner gets to set that vibe. And depending on your location, your consumer base changes. So if you're up in Everett, if you're in Snohomish County, on 99, you might get a lot of pre-roll buyers in and out, maybe not looking for the highest price. They are chasing deals. But down in, like, say, West Seattle, where there are more affluent individuals living, you can charge higher rates for the products that you're selling. And you might want to provide a little bit, in my words, a bougier customer service experience for those people, right? So this changes across the state. Like this is just this side of the state. Now we go to the other side that has a different U.S. Attorney General. Shout out to an individual that put me on. And their whole process is a bit different as well. So the culture of cannabis and this business operation and the consumers that you see differ based on the location of your retail operation, straight up, right? So when you're saying to provide a standard level of training, in my mind, you're talking like OSHA standards, PCI compliant, because you're taking credit cards or debit cards and or taking payment via that way. Basic sales strategies. What else could be compared to this? You know what I mean? Like, oh, CPR. That is. Sorry about that, getting my incoming phone call. So CPR standards, because you're dealing with the public and you never know what sort of medical emergency that could happen in your shop. Am I back online? Am I back online? Okay. Okay. Can y'all hear me? Can I get a thumbs up if you in there? Because my screen is tweaking. Okay, so like CPR, medical care, dealing with emergency response, dealing with safety. So having to deal with like robberies and how you would normally, all of that is standardized training that any current retail industry could be like copied over and placed into the cannabis market. But the thing that we see missing, right, in some of what is proposed is actual cannabis education, cannabis science education. That is a requirement as a bud tender. And so why does it not apply to other industries? Like you can teach a grocery store worker how to check for expiration dates and dents on cans and that sort of product placement. But is that as applicable to evaluating a plant? Is that as applicable as staying up on the numerous products that continuously are issued upon market? The basic health component that cannabis touches, like the biggest issues, cannabis touches the political sector, it touches say retail sector, it touches health, it touches medicine. So these are way bigger factors than some things such as an organization that is experienced in training grocery stores. It's a little bit more than they can handle, meaning a partnership with an academic organization, in my mind, would be a great freaking idea. From other individuals, they said a longer response was needed, 27%. And what they stated is that the lack of diverse dispensaries in their area, meaning that the dispensaries are owned, like there are only 11, 5 of the 11 are owned by the same company, means a lack of diverse products that are available because, again, these shops have the right to choose what they hold in their stores. So not all shops carry the same brands. And if there were more dispensaries, then it would be a greater chance of coming across new brands as a result of the culture created by that business. They value high volume stores that carry the same product, but a smaller shop can make it more personal and give a niche experience. So this is a person that is saying it yes, but this is why I think yes. Another individual said no, but this is why I think no. Any retail business will benefit from a 2-tier service: product knowledge and sales training, upselling, converting customers to higher quality products. However, at this point, cannabis workers are being held to a much higher standard. You have to be knowledgeable about all of the brands on the shelf across different categories and always be aware of new things coming to the market. You will never find a target employee who will give you the same service expected from a bud tender. And that's accurate because people are consuming, what up, Steady? People are consuming a plant. And furthermore, like you being bad at being a bud tender means that your consumer could have a very negative side effect, right? They might just not like their product, cool, but they might be pushed into, if you sold someone an RSO and it was their first time consuming it, you might have pushed them into a negative mental state, right? Based off of your recommendation, just overall poor experience after consuming a product they weren't ready to handle. And so you have to be more aware than the average retailer, right? Like the average retailer with clothes, like, well, the size didn't fit. That's fine. Or the can is expired. Okay, let's give you a different one. In this situation, we don't even have harvest dates on the package. It doesn't really apply to the cannabis industry to make sense to have that. But if you sold someone pesticides, like a pesticide sprayed product that they have told you they've had a reaction to, not fun for them. Or you sold them something very energizing and uplifting that they tell you induces panic attacks, also not good for you as a bartender. You're not being aware of your consumer, and being able to recognize those differences, being able to talk people through those differences are the essential role of a bartender in this industry. That's my point. So, and finally, someone said a longer response is needed. It depends on where you're opening. Speaks again to the microclimate caused by where a retail location opens up. Who is your consumer base? So to say that you can provide general training for the cannabis industry without actually looking at how each shop has its own consumer base and how they have to develop their sales strategy, it's doing a disservice. That's my opinion there. Now, what I have been questioning, which is the hopelessness, right, of the cannabis industry at this point in time, is that if we get, say we make it all the way to issuing these equity licenses, and we have more retail locations opening up, the cost at this moment in time, no one really has been talking about the cost, but I asked current dispensary holders, current license holders, how much does it cost to open a retail location, flush it out with employees, all the things you need, products on your shelves? At the low end, they said 100,000. At the high end, it's $1 million, right? For one shop. At the low end, 100,000. At the high end, 1 million. So the state is looking at it by providing a grant. I'm not quite sure how the city is looking at it, but where are we going to get the money to help, say, a licensee holder or a potential licensee holder that would be granted the social equity license? Where would it come from? And what I have seen in this state, not to say that any of this legislation is talking about a tax at this point in time, but their solutions to finding money is to tax the people. That's just historic. So on a city level, the city of Seattle does not have a marijuana excise tax. The statewide, it's 37%. And when we're talking about sales and we're talking about market constriction, what we do know is that excise tax, that 37%, is whooping business owners' ass out here, straight up. It is whooping their ass. What that means to you as a consumer, the product that you pick up outside of Seattle is marked up 3.5 times its normal cost. Within the city of Seattle, what's going on? The markup that you see on the products that you're purchasing was what, 2.3 to 3 times higher. And that's just mainly because as an industry, individuals in Seattle are being charged potentially more to get their products. The retailers are being charged more to get their products than some other places. And when I asked why there wasn't why brokers or sales reps don't charge a flat rate across the board, there are many factors. Does this retail location have more than one shop that they could put our product in? Are they going to run a sales on it? So the numbers fluctuate at which we are selling cannabis to the retailer. And the retailer needs to make sure that they get their cut to the government, that they cover their overhead, and then they get their profit, right? So margins mean more than volume. And if we're looking at where the more of the money that comes in, it's on the other side of the state. At least that's what I've been told. So we issue a social equity license to someone who has been disproportionately impacted. We give them a grant for a bit of startup money. And what do they do? Where do they go? They have to find a location. Okay, one, I'm not sure you get to pick where you get your license issued, what municipality, right? So you get a license and they tell you where you can set up a retail location. Cool. Two, right now, there's a lot of legislation that prevent dispensaries from being close to one another, close to schools, close to parks. So we're limiting the amount of retail access is available. And the city of Seattle recognizes that and are doing some research into where they can find, where they can adjust some of those requirements and what it would cost the city as a whole to do that adjustment. Therefore, more retail locations for their 2 to 8 license pop up, right? Or probable. But just opening a retail location, once again, 100,000 to 1 million, right? And we're considering the cost of the retail location itself, finding a spot. And what we found is that if you have to rent a spot, oh, be prepared to pay for it, honey. Be prepared to pay a lot in that monthly rent. So your overhead is already high starting up. And a majority right now that we can see is that most individuals got into this business because they love cannabis, right? They're like in the early days. And then they were washed out by individuals that know business better, but really don't love cannabis. And so they're struggling as business owners. Now we throw individuals that were washed out, but have they done what's needed to up their business acumen to compete in these current climates? I don't know. And the training that will be provided would have to address that for these social equity applicants and license holders, right? It would directly have to address that and maybe potentially give them access to the funding they need to maintain an operation. Are we going to set these people up for failure? So that is my concern with the hopelessness. Like, are we looking at this logically? I mean, I think that is a overall overarching look at what we're having seen right now, right, in Washington cannabis equity. The state itself or the city itself, I think September, I don't want to give a date, but they proposed a date for the next meeting where they would begin talking about the ordinances that have passed out of committee. And they're following up with their legislative process. It will definitely be on the docket for 2023. We know that the Liquor and Cannabis Board has till the 28th of September to finalize these draft rules, and the Social Equity Task Force has until December to make their recommendations to the Liquor and Cannabis Board directly for implementation and distribution of the state awarded licenses. The final thing that I have a bone to pick about this whole overall process is how the state is going about getting these unused licenses available. There are individuals that fought very hard to maintain the licenses that they have, that are the licenses are issued in areas where the state the city, the local municipalities have a moratorium against cannabis businesses. And I just am unsure if that issue will be rectified with any of these legislations being pushed forward. So is it still up to the local municipalities of whether or not they're going to allow a cannabis business in their space, right? And if that's the case, are you, the individuals who already have a license in those areas that might fit the social equity criteria, are you going to give them back their licenses directly, right? So, because right now, I can tell you, the Liquor and Cannabis Board are trying to, the state is trying to rescind those licenses so that they can have these 39 unused licenses available to hand out when they're ready to hand them out. So if they're taking them back, what criteria are they taking them back on? And for some of the individuals that meet the social equity criteria, are you guaranteeing that they are going to be the ones to get it, or are you going to screw them over in this process once again? Right. I have yet to see answers about that, and I've yet to see conversations about how they're going about getting these licenses. So talk to me, slide into my DMs, slide into the comment section of this. I thank you for tuning in to my ramble about the social equity, but when I tell you it's heating up out here, it's heating up. And as always, I forgot to roll my joint, but stay baked.